To understand the depth of this next Sicha in Sichot Haran, we're going to have to look at Torah Samech Dalet 64 in the Haran. There Rabbi Nachman expounds beautifully and profoundly the power of thought. The greatest deterrent, Rabbi Nachman explains, to closeness to Hashem, closeness to one's inner self, experiencing the joy within oneself, experiencing the peace within oneself. All of these things are deterred by one force, the force of Paro. As we're moving into Pesach, we're moving into the redemption of Mitzrayim. We know that Mitzrayim comes from the word Mitzrayim, which means constrictions. And according to Chazal, especially the Hasidic masters and the great Kabbalists, this freedom and liberation from Mitzrayim was not a mere physical liberation, but was actually a psycho-spiritual liberation primarily. It was one of the mind. And who is the greatest obstacle of the mind? Paro. In the beginning of Mesilat Yesharim, the Ramchal, the great tzaddik, who delineated and codified the steps towards closeness to Hashem, which is studied all around the world. Similar to Rabbi Nachman, the Ramchal passed away at 38 years old, and also in a very short amount of time, like Rabbi Nachman, completely transformed the Jewish world from then until the days of Mashiach, to the extent that we're still drawing from the light of the Ramchal, the light of the Arizal, the light of Rabbi Nachman, who all passed away around the same age, which I'm sure, as you can guess, is no coincidence. In the beginning of Mesilat Yesharim, the Ramchal explains that for a person to be able to climb the ladder of Kedusha, to get close to the source of existence, he needs to combat this force that was in Mitzrayim called Paro. Paro, the Ramchal explains, comes from the word and the shoresh, which means to divert. That the root of the word Paro actually means to divert one's attention. And obviously, to divert one's attention takes place in the mind. How does he do it? He does it through foreign thoughts, negative thoughts, external thoughts, superficial thoughts. In the words of psychology, we would call it distorted core beliefs, ones in which we believe are for sure the case. They must be. This is what it is and what it's always been and always will be, just as I am. All of these are coming from Paro. And what happens when we are meditating on these distorted thoughts, when we are being diverted by Paro? Then we are experiencing what the Jews experienced in Mitzrayim, which was complete servitude. That we were getting whipped and shackled by the Mitzrayim over and over and over again. And every time that we tried to break free, they worked us harder. All of this is an allusion to the power of machshava, of thought. Like it's taught in the great Hasidic texts, based on very deep Kabbalah, one cannot actually fight a negative thought. And the more that you engage in it, like Rabbi Nachman explains many times in his writings, the stronger that thought gets. And anybody who's tried to fight negative thoughts knows this, as a former clinical therapist and social worker, and obviously myself as a client over the course of many years, knows that when you try and fight negative thoughts, they come back stronger. And all the more so now that you're on a spiritual journey, and the power of thought becomes all the more cogent, because you need that in order to learn Torah. You need that in order to pray. You need that in order to do Ibodedut. You need that in order to have Yishuv Das, tranquility of mind, to be able to control one's thoughts. And Rabbi Nachman's Eitzah in this case, when it comes to these negative thoughts barraging you, is to simply think about something else. Because one of the things that Rav Natan, Rabbi Nachman's main student, his main disciple, the reason that we have anything from Rabbi Nachman, and in truth, probably the main cause of the collective Geula, the coming of the Mashiach, in the Sichot of Rav Natan, his disciple, the one who we can all relate to, that person who went against all odds to believe in something based on this deep yearning to try and find something deeper in one's life and not to give up until he finds it. And then when he finally finds it, going against the world to live with it, to protect it, to expound it, to draw it out to the whole world. This is Rav Natan Zal. And one of the things that Rav Natan very much struggled with was foreign thoughts. That every time he came to learn, he was thinking about negative things. When he went to go pray, he was thinking about negative things. And he got different pieces of advice from different tzaddikim, but none of them helped him. And finally he got to Rabbi Nachman. And Rabbi Nachman told him, Nasala, my dear Nasan, stop trying to overpower that thought. Just simply think about something different. Rav Natan says, what do you mean? He says, this is something very deep. There's only a few ways that we know that Hashem is completely different from us. Rabbi Nachman elucidates these in Likutei Moharan. I believe he lists 5 things. Very deep, very short lesson. And one of those things Rabbi Nachman explains is that we can only think one thought at a time. Whereas Hashem, so to speak, thinks every thought at one time. Now, as my old students in Queens would say, this is a bug out. If you don't really think about this and contemplate, trying to think all the thoughts of existence at one time, this is what Hashem does. And obviously this is what allows, so to speak, Hashem to continuously affect different actions, courses of events, historical phenomenon, circumstances in a person's personal life, all at one time. Why? Because Rabbi Nachman explains that Hashem thinks every thought at one time, whereas we can only possibly think one thought at one time while we're in a physical body. Okay? So now, that's very deep, something to contemplate. But what's the practical output of it? Because Rabbi Nachman, at the end of the day, he was not coming to teach us very deep things so that we can escape reality. He was teaching us very deep things so that we can move into reality at a deeper level. And he wants to come out with a practical eitzah. And what was the practical eitzah that changed Rav Natan's life? You can't possibly think about 2 things at once because nobody can. Use that to your advantage. When you have a negative thought pop in your head, think about something else. Because Rabbi Nachman says, I promise you, if you allow another thought to enter your head and you do the best you can to meditate and concentrate on that other thought, and Rabbi Nachman gives other tools to be able to do that, such as utilizing your body, using hitlavut, the energy of the body, to engage with the thought that you want to think about, dancing, singing, clapping, movement of the body, pacing back and forth as you're trying to think about this other thought. Or let's say you can't move because you're in tefillah, so then to pray with very loud volume, because like it says in the Shulchan Aruch, that when a person has kavanat alev, it comes from the kol, it comes from the voice. And Rabbi Nachman said that even though the Arizal prayed in a very quiet voice, Rabbi Nachman said, I'm like the very old Hasidim, that I believe that you should come to Hashem mamish sweating. Sweating from dancing and screaming and calling out to Hashem in a loud voice. And that's why if you ever have the Sichot, the merit to go into a Breslov shul, you're going to hear it's louder than usual. To the extent once that I heard a story, actually, I was in New Jersey once, trying to give over the teachings of Rabbi Nachman. I think it was a Chag. And the person there was an amazing rabbi, very special, but he doesn't come from the more Hasidic, Kabbalistic background, and it's not his interest. He's very much more of a normative Lithuanian background and tradition, and he feels this is his truth, okay? But when I was there, and because of what my brother-in-law told him about me, or cousin-in-law, sorry, and because some of his students had over time started learning teachings through Tzion Breslov and other ways connecting to me. So he decided to tell a story about his father when I was there. I think it was him and his father. They were in Eretz Yisrael, and they ended up, I think, in Mea Sharim in the Breslov shul there, I think on Shabbat. And he said that it was so loud in there. There was so much, like the tefillah was so much fire, and it was with so much energy and so much volume that literally at some point on Shabbat, there was an Arab who threw a rock through the window and it shattered. And it wasn't like a normal window. It's like the windows that are in Beit Knesset. They are like these huge panels that are thick and with glass and colors. And it shattered all over the back of the Beit Knesset. And he said, I kid you not, not one person noticed that the window shattered, because of how much that they were so intensely and fervently into their tefillah, into their prayer. And one of the ways you might ask yourself, well, I even when it's completely quiet, I can't pay attention. One of the things that Rabbi Nachman's students took to heart, which he advocated for very much, is to pray with volume, because volume of the voice engenders concentration of the heart, and that was not his chiddush. This is brought down by Chazal, and it's something that the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Cairo brings down in Code of Halakha, Jewish law. But Rabbi Nachman, in his efforts for our generation, when he knew that machshavot ra'ot, negative thoughts, would be at an all-time high, and to the extent that Rabbi Nachman said that we're going to deal with a form of negativity that the world has never experienced before. The Gemara, Rabbi Nachman explains, has 7 versions of the Satan, of the Yetzer Hara, of the Malach HaMavet, of pretty much the force of negativity, and how it expresses itself in different generations to challenge that generation based on what they need in order to achieve their tikkun, their rectification. But in the final generation, Rabbi Nachman says, we're going to have a whole new form of negativity, expression of it that we've never had in history, to the extent that it's not even listed in these 7 in the Gemara. That is the koach medameh, the power of one's imagination. The power of one's own imagination. Meaning, negative thoughts that are not rooted in reality. And obviously we see that psychological distress is at an all-time high. Stress, emotional stress is at an all-time high. More money is being funneled into the psychological world, into the psychiatric world, into forms of different mental health and physical health in order to promote mental health. There's an all-time high, so to speak, of negative thoughts. And Rabbi Nachman predicted this 250 years ago. So, what was the advice that he gave Rabbi Nachman? They gave Rav Natan? Think about something different. And scream it. And move with it. And if you go back to that other thought, just go back again. And just keep going back again. And Rabbi Nachman says, if you continuously do this, as time goes on, that thought will stop popping up in your head. Now, again, we brought up in the beginning, why is it that Rabbi Nachman says we're having these negative thoughts? Where are they coming from? They're coming from Paro, he explains in the 64th Torah of Likutei Moharan. They're coming from Paro. Where does Paro come from? So for this, we're going to need to understand the beginning of creation. That when Hashem wanted to create the world in order that he should be able to give all of his good to some receiver, he needed to make a space within himself in order to do so, because he's all that there was, the Arizal says. So what did he do? There was a tzimtzum, there was a contraction. He contracted himself within himself. He made a space within himself, an empty void, in which he could then create a world, humanity, a receiver, someone who can makabel, someone who can receive his infinite or his infinite light, his infinite good. However, Hashem created, so to speak, a built-in flaw into his creation. And that is that the receiver that he created originally would not be able to hold the light that he was trying to give over. What ended up happening as a result of that? When Hashem shone his light through his original creation, which is alluded to as a secret in the Midrashim, where it says that Hashem created and destroyed many worlds before he actually landed on ours, is that all of the different kelim, the different vessels of creation, were destroyed when the light of Hashem shone through them. Because of the proliferation of a light, it was too much intensity, and there was too much of it. And the vessels were not created in a way naturally, or at least originally, in their primordial state, to be able to hold that light, and they shattered. When those vessels shattered, so to speak, those vessels then degraded and devolved down through many worlds. And that ended up creating the space of what's called the klipot, the forces of negativity in the world, which are utilized in order to draw us away from the emet, from truth. The truth of existence, the truth of your soul, the truth of reality, the truth of one's life, the truth of your mission, who you are, where you're going, where you've been. What's the purpose? What should you be doing with your life? What should you be doing with your day? What should I be doing right now, achshav? Right? All of the forces of negativity are there to promote disunity. And that all came from Shvirat HaKelim, these breaking of the vessels from this intensity of light. What is it that allows these vessels to continue to exist? It's the little bit of light that's in them. Because without that light, they would have no chiyut, they would have no life force, the Arizal explains. So it's that light that's in exile, so to speak, in these broken kelim. These need to be elevated and lifted up in order for us to have geula, redemption. It's the task of the Jewish people, primarily, to uplift these sparks of godliness which are trapped in these broken vessels. And this, Rabbi Nachman explains, is the reason why a person has these negative thoughts. So this is an unbelievable paradigm shift. These negative thoughts are not coming from primarily only, let's say, some type of trauma or some type of core beliefs that developed as a child. All of those are aftermath. They're all byproducts of a primordial existence, one in which these sparks of godliness fell in with these broken vessels. And the lower they fell, the darker, so to speak, those thoughts are. Now, as the generations go on, we have to go lower and lower into those broken shards. And this final generation is, so to speak, in the netherworlds of these shards. And this is the deep Kabbalistic underpinning of why we have such psychological distress in this generation like never seen before. However, on the other hand, we have an ability to lift up these sparks, to rectify these exiled lights of godliness which have been hidden over and concealed in these broken places, meaning in our foreign thoughts. How do we do that? So Rabbi Nachman explains, and based on the Arizal as well, it's primarily through tefillah. And that's the reason they explain that when a person comes to pray, that's usually when he's besieged by the most negative thoughts. But sometimes it happens even when you learn Torah, that when you try and focus on Hashem, a lot of people notice they start having these crazy thoughts, or just normal thoughts, or previously normal thoughts from my past life. But now where I'm holding, I don't want these thoughts. Or even like more simply, just negative thoughts about myself, negative thoughts about others. Why are they popping into my head right now? Because you have a koach, you have an ability to elevate those thoughts. So how do you do that? Rabbi Nachman says by not focusing on them and just focusing on what is good. Forcing yourself to focus on what is good. And the mashal that Rabbi Nachman gives for doing so is like that you yourself are like the rider of a horse, and your thoughts are like a horse. And while the horse might feel out of control, the horse might swing his head from left to right, he might start rolling in different directions, running and roaring in different directions. But a rider who's capable, who's expert in riding this horse, he knows how to simply rear in through his ability to steer these thoughts, to steer this horse. Meaning, simply, there's a way to rear in and to control negative thinking. And the chiddush of Rabbi Nachman is you do it by thinking about something else. And if you do this enough, you're going to be able to completely eviscerate all negative thoughts. And along the way, you will also lift up the sparks, because this will be happening primarily when you're praying and when you're learning. And therefore, if I focus on something else, meaning what I'm praying about, what I'm learning about, then I'm going to be able to do so. And this is also the secret of why Rabbi Nachman was very much against people using kavanot, using mystical intentions when they come to pray, instead of meaning the words themselves. Because Rabbi Nachman explained that the whole koach of tefillah and of Torah is the simple meaning of the words, because through the simple of the meaning of the words, I can roar that out, because it's real to me, because I could say it and I know what I'm saying. But if I'm not utilizing my voice to say the simple meaning of what I'm saying, it's going to be much harder for me to, so to speak, elevate the sparks in this place, because I don't have control of my mind right now. Whereas the voice is the tikkun for this. Through the voice, I'm able to elevate these sparks, but the voice is only capable when it resonates as true in my heart. So therefore, by saying something simply, but saying with force, with energy, this is what causes the elevation of the spark. So there's more to be said over there. All of this is a hakdama to this very short sicha, where Rabbi Nachman explains like this: Kishalomde mile de fornita. When a person learns in the Torah about matters which are inherently negative. For example, Kishalomdim halachot avelot v'chayotze. For instance, like when a person, he learns the laws of mourning, right? We know that there's many laws that are dealing with when a person who you love passes away. Chas v'shalom, it should happen to any of us, but a mother, a father, a spouse, a child, chas v'shalom. There's laws of mourning. It's not simply a matter of, okay, let me just try to get through this. There's many laws of mourning. Part of the deep reason why we have so many laws of mourning is because the sages and Chazal and the Torah and Hashem himself created through these laws the ability to actually process tragedy in a way which is healthy, and a way that allows you to move on in your life in a positive way, as opposed to what you would naturally do, which might be other things which seem to make more sense, but then you end up carrying the trauma of mourning longer. So Rabbi Nachman says that, let's say you're learning Shulchan Aruch, you're going from the beginning to the end like Rabbi Nachman suggests to do. You're just starting from the beginning simply, and you're just learning the first law, and then you learn the next one, and then you learn the next one. So eventually you're going to get to Chilchot Avelot, you're going to get to the laws of mourning. What do you do then? Ein la'ayin sham harbe. As opposed to the other laws in the Shulchan Aruch, which Rabbi Nachman says it's a very good idea for you to delve deeply into those laws. It does a tremendous birur. You extract tremendous lights of godliness when you are discerning good from bad, when you're discerning kosher from treif, when you're discerning tahor from tameh, pure from impure. That when you learn halacha deeply, meaning that you're really applying your mind in halacha, in trying to understand the difference between the two and discerning in the laws, this is a tremendous tikkun for the mind and brings one to emunah. And for that, Rabbi Nachman was very emphatic about his encouragement of this practice. However, when it came to the laws of Avelut, Rabbi Nachman says, don't spend any time at all. Just simply go through it. Because you don't need to use the depth of one's thought in these types of places. Because thought, there is in thought tremendous power. Like is explained in many other places. In Likutei Moran, in Likutei Halachot, in Sichot Haran. In all of the Sifrei of Rabbeinu, in all the books of Rabbi Nachman discusses at length the power of thought, to the extent in some Sichos and also in the Haran, Rabbi Nachman actually says that a person can think something into existence. Okay? Don't just start practicing or trying it. It could be, though, that in the past you have remembered a time in which you thought of something very deeply and then you saw it. So maybe that thing is deeper than you think. But Rabbi Nachman says in multiple places that a person, through the power of thought, can create actual realities. This is all based on a Gemara in Masechet Makot, where the Maharsha explains that a person, when he thinks positive thoughts or negative thoughts, it creates, so to speak, advocates or prosecutors for him spiritually. So how do they come about from one's thoughts? Because the power of thought is to create reality just through thought itself. And you see this actually in the beginning of the Torah. It says, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, Hashem created spiritual reality and physical reality. But the word Reshit, Rashi says, doesn't really mean beginning. Reshit is a conjunctive. It's an adjunct to explain something else. Right? It should say Berishonah in the beginning. So what does Rashi explain? That Reshit is an actual entity. Bereshit, with Reshit, Hashem created all the spiritual and physical reality. So what's Reshit? So Rabbi Nachman, so Rashi explains, I'm so used to saying it, Baruch Hashem. So Rashi explains there that Reshit can mean Yisrael. For the sake of the Jewish people, Hashem created Shemayim va'aretz. Reshit also means Torah. Meaning, through the Torah, Hashem created the spiritual and physical worlds. However, according to Kabbalah, Reshit is a code word for the sphere of Chokhmah. Chokhmah means wisdom. It's in the realm of mochin, of thought, of consciousness. With thoughts, Hashem created Shemayim va'aretz. And this is actually alluded to in Chazal and in Arizal, when the Arizal explains, what does it mean that it said the Jewish people arose in thought and Hashem decided to create the world? That mamish, it was Hashem's thought, so to speak, that created reality, the thought of the Jewish people. And Rabbi Nachman has an unbelievable Torah on this, where he explains that you see that creation starts and begins with thought, and specifically with a good thought. And where is his proof for this? That if you want to create a new reality in your life, it all begins with a positive thought, with a good thought. Because Rabbi Nachman says, look at the beginning of the Torah, which is the instantiation of reality. It's the beginning of reality. What does it say there? Bereshi bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. For the sake of the Jewish people, Hashem created Shemayim v'aretz. How did Hashem create? For the sake of the Jewish people. What is that, Rabbi Nachman says? Machshava tova. It's a good thought. Hashem had a good thought, and then all of a sudden, creation started ensuing. So too, same by us. And you can experience this psychologically. If I force myself to think about positive thoughts, even though I'm having negative thoughts, you will see that your life actually starts to change. You experience it changing. And it's not just a psychological phenomenon. Rabbi Nachman explains in Haran, you're literally giving Hashem the ability to create new realities for you, because the birthplace of new reality comes from positive thoughts. Okay? And therefore, Rabbi Nachman says, and therefore, a person, when he's covering these different laws, which he needs to do, because Rabbi Nachman says every Jew, every single day, needs to learn the Shulchan Aruch. He needs to learn Jewish law, not just for the sake of knowing what to do, but because Kabbalistically it achieves tremendous bir, or extraction of sparks of godliness, and brings one to Emunah, and to a settled mind, and to Yirat Shamayim. Okay, many things that we need, to the extent that Rabbi Nachman, in his testament before he passed away, told all of his students that they need to study Shulchan Aruch every single day. And it doesn't mean it has to be very long, it doesn't mean it has to be very in-depth, but just that you have to do it, because of the power of it is so great. So now, all of this is to say, to bring us back to the beginning. We have Pesach coming up, we have redemption coming up, we have Geula coming up. Now is the time that we need to clean our house of chametz. Rabbi Nachman explains in the 5th Torah in the Haran, chametz is the concept of secular wisdom, which does not just mean philosophy. It doesn't just mean man-made thought processes, types of consciousness that was created by man. It also means negative thoughts. This is what we need to remove every single speck of. And if you remove every single speck, then you can eat matzah on Pesach. And matzah is emunah. Matzah is emunah. So the beginning of emunah is the cleaning of all negative thoughts, picking up all of those crumbs and burning them. Okay? What's the light in which we burn these crumbs with? The ore of the tzaddik. Take all of your negative thoughts and have kashrut with the tzaddik Yisod Olam. Connect yourself with the tremendous tzaddik, the light of ancient days, Rabbi Nachman. Learn his teachings, practically fulfill his advice. Try to get to Uman for Rosh Hashanah. Help his students who are trying to spread his teachings to the world. And you will increase your kashrut with the tzaddik Yisod Olam, and through this you will achieve bira of your negative thoughts over the course of time. And this was a guarantee of Rabbi Nachman to his students at the end of his life. He told them, there's one thing for sure I can tell Hashem when I get at Gan Eden, that you all now have pure powers of imagination. You all can think clearly. And even though we might not think, oh, that's such a great thing, that's such an unbelievable thing, I guarantee you, there's nothing more valuable in the world. Rabbi Nachman Mamish says it's treasure. It's a treasure that you have to protect with all your life. Clear thoughts. Clear thoughts, Rabbi Nachman says, is the key to joy. And joy and clear thoughts are the keys to experiencing real closeness to Hashem. And this is all alluded to by Pesach, where Moshe Rabbeinu, the Tzaddik Yisod Olam, ripped us out of Mitzrayim, where he clarified our powers of imagination, and he brought us the Torah, he brought us the truth of truths, and through this we were able to connect to Hashem and leave behind psychological, spiritual, and physical servitude. So Bezrat Hashem, we should take this lesson very, very seriously and try to internalize it in our lives. We have Shabbat Hagadol coming up. This is the most important Shabbat of the whole year, in some ways. It's called the Great Shabbat, even though even in Tefillah we already call it Shabbat Hagadol. So what is Shabbat Hagadol? It's Shabbat Hagadol. It's this great, great Shabbat. And we know that according to the Zohar, all blessings that come into the week come from the previous Shabbat. Everything that happens in the upcoming week comes from the previous Shabbat. So how do we draw Pesach for ourselves? Redemption. It starts this Shabbat. So Bezrat Hashem, do your very best to try to think about positive thoughts. And when a negative thought comes up, simply rear your mind to a positive thought. And if you're having trouble keeping your mind on that positive thought, roar it out loud. Move with that thought. Say it out loud. Use your body. But do not give up on the positive thought. Don't allow yourself to sink into the negative thought. That is what it wants more than anything. And this is the greatest deterrent to closeness to Hashem. This is actually one's own internal Mitzrayim. And Bezrat Hashem, B'schut, the Tzaddik Yisod Olam, Rabbi Nachman, whose gematria of his name is Pesach itself. We should all experience Pesach this year, mamish, with the coming of the Mashiach, the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, and the ingathering of the exiles, collectively and personally. That should be B'Rav Yameinu. Thank you, everybody.